I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room. This summer, Governor Kathy Hochul issued an executive order putting a pause on the permitting of new so-called hyperscale data centers in New York for a year, citing concerns about public subsidies for these projects, what they could mean for the state's electricity grid, and their need for natural resources. The unilateral moratorium comes about a month after Democratic state lawmakers passed a more expansive one-year moratorium, which came with additional strings for future projects and stakeholders. The fate of that bill is unclear. And while the governor's actions are broadly popular among New York voters and were welcome news to environmental advocates, the pause is opposed by unions at work on these projects. For more on this story, we're checking in with Marie French, the energy and environment reporter at the Capitol for Politico New York. Well, the governor has framed the development of data centers as a pressing concern, telling Capitol Tonight recently that, quote, they are literally flooding the zone with more and more applications than we have ever had before. How would you describe the interest in developing data centers in New York, at least, I guess, prior to this moratorium announcement?
Definitely, Dave. So I guess, it's important to put this in a national perspective because this is a national issue that many states are grappling with. On a national level, New York is not necessarily like the hotspot for data center development. I mean, we're not seeing as much interest as states like Texas or Virginia. So that's like good to keep in mind. But it is true that the number of applications coming into the state's grid operator to connect has absolutely exploded in the last year and a half or so. So that demand is having a real impact on the state's energy planning and the planning by the grid operator to meet future demand, because these projects are coming in and saying they want to use, 500 megawatts, a gigawatt of power, so these projects are submitting applications to use power from the grid. Now, how real those are, that's sort of a major question, and something that the grid operator is also kind of trying to get their hands around in terms of how many of these are real projects that are really going to move forward. Is some of it just speculative where people are like, well, let's see how much it would cost to plop something right there, and would it be expensive to hook up to the grid, or would it be really cheap, and could we just sell that capacity to an Amazon or a Meta down the road?
So then what is it about the existing permitting process, either at the state or local level, that wouldn't allow for, say, the rejection of permits to these centers because of some of the concerns that the governor says are behind this moratorium, like the availability of power or natural resources? Do we just have no say in what gets permitted at the state and local level? Do we just have to grant every permit that we get a request for, an application for?
Certainly, that's not the case, Dave. As you know, it's considered very difficult to build things in New York anyway. What the governor has said is, more that this is like sort of a slow down, hold up, like let us take the time to examine this sort of, in some ways, it's novel industry. I mean, obviously, data centers have existed for a long time, but this size of electricity demand and these large scale data centers to support AI are kind of a newer problem that the whole country is kind of getting its arms around. So I think that's sort of been her stance on this, is that hold up, slow down, like let us take the time to really examine this. It's a pause on state permits, right? So local governments can still pass moratoriums. They can still, do whatever they want with their approval process. This is nothing in this executive order said, oh, local governments can't or can issue these permits.
The governor's gubernatorial opponent, Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman, has made the point that the state should have already figured out its regulatory scheme for data centers, and that makes a certain amount of sense to me, considering how the proliferation of even these large-scale data centers didn't happen overnight. I mean, it's the focus of the movie Eddington, and that came out a couple of years ago. So what exactly is the state supposed to be doing during this moratorium, and does it seem like the state was caught flat-footed from your perspective?
That's hard to judge, right? So we talked about sort of the projects like looking to hook up, but there are also projects that are in like later stage development. There's some already under construction, some crypto mining operations are shifting to AI, some We know about the project out in Genesee County that's looking to move forward in sort of a shorter time frame. So there are projects out there. The state had already started looking at this issue, right? The governor announced in her State of the State, like, I'm going to have the PSC look at it. That was in January. A lot of the momentum in the state legislature and at the executive level really only started, mid to late last year, as more and more awareness was building about the quantity of projects in the grid operators queue.
Well, I guess I'm wondering whether the moratorium in itself and the rationale for it is a more cynical approach to a political issue, and that this is really about appealing to the majority of New Yorkers who are not fans of data centers, and the idea that we need a year to figure out how to appropriately regulate and place data centers is just a convenient way to solve a political problem and is not necessarily a policy need.
Wow. Usually I'm the cynical one, Dave. I mean, there is, right, a school of thought on this, that this is a political, move by Hochul because this is not, as large of an issue in New York. She can do this and gain some brownie points from the environmental, interests that have, been pretty upset with her about some things recently. That's certainly like one school of thought to look at this. Obviously, the governor's folks would disagree. They would say, she's doing this to really address an issue. I mean, I look back just at some of my previous stories about this late last year, and like, everybody was like, yeah, New York's not really that attractive, but it could be an issue in some regions, some areas. This could be super popular. Does it really make sense? Do we really want these projects when they don't bring that many jobs and use so much energy? I mean, these are all issues that people have been talking about.
Are the concerns about energy consumption unique to New York and our capacity, or are other states grappling with concerns about data centers, particularly these new ones, gobbling up power and essentially competing for power with existing residential and commercial customers?
This is certainly a national issue, Dave. Governors and state leaders across the country are kind of pumping the brakes on this industry in a lot of ways. Local governments are, coming out and putting their own moratoriums and opposing these projects. So this is not an issue that's unique to New York in any way.
There are states, as you pointed out, that want these data centers, are getting these data centers. So, what are proponents of these projects saying will be the negative effect of New York putting a pause on this and making it less attractive, at least in the short term, for developing here?
People who have these types of projects, they're being financially harmed potentially by this moratorium. Labor unions who, their members and their workers would build these projects are very opposed. They see this as a major kind of blow to some positions they had in the pipeline that could have, come to fruition were it not for this moratorium in pretty short order. Those are probably the main folks. Obviously, some big tech and business groups have said, they just don't like moratoriums, and they don't obviously think this is going to be good since that's their business.
The governor has framed the job creation from a data center as being temporary because the construction jobs make up the most of the jobs associated with them. But this isn't like building a house where you're done in a couple of months. I mean, these projects could take potentially years to build. So, what do the labor unions say about the benefit of the job creation here? And do they think of these as temporary jobs, or do they think of these as more like one to another, and potentially representing many years of jobs?
Well, most construction jobs are temporary jobs, so but that's sort of what they do, right? They have folks who can build things, and they go out on one project, and then they go out on another
Sure.
project, and that's how they keep things going. So, I mean, that's yeah, they're obviously see this as an essential part of of employment opportunities for their members.
Democrats who backed the one-year statutory moratorium still want their bill signed. They've been going to these events with the governor and then also saying, P.S., there's some legislation we'd like you to act on. Do you think the governor has any appetite for that in the wake of this executive action where she controls all the cards?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's expressed some level of openness to that and to entering negotiations with the legislature on it. Obviously, there are pieces of the bill that go much farther than what the governor, approved. That would be like codifying labor standards for these projects. That would be, requiring them to purchase certain amounts of renewable energy. Lots of other pieces to this. So you're going to certainly see lawmakers and advocates, environmental advocates, push for her to take on some of those issues.
The projects that have been developed to date have included public subsidies, and most notably are these sales tax exemptions. And the governor has said that she wants to repeal the ability of, say, local economic development entities to offer sales tax exemptions, I think of even the state's portion. What sort of appetite do you think there will be for something like that amongst the legislature, which hasn't necessarily wanted to tie the hands of local economic development agencies who can sometimes be made up of boards with their friends and supporters?
Yeah, I think that will be a very interesting piece of this to watch. It only really became clear that the governor was also targeting the IDA piece of this in the past couple of days. Senator Rachel May has a bill on this already, so there's clearly a little bit of support in the Democratic conference in the Senate. Whether it ends up being something that the legislature really wants to prevent IDAs from granting tax packages to these projects remains to be seen.
What does the future look like a year from now in terms of either new rules or regulations from the Hochul administration or interest in these projects? Do you think there's still going to be demand in 2027 for New York? And do you think we'll have an updated regulatory scheme in a timely fashion?
Without making any predictions about the future of the stock market or AI companies generally.
Well, and that is a good point, because if the interest in AI wanes, then so does maybe the interest in hyperscale data centers.
Right. I think that's sort of a question mark hanging over this, and something that people have certainly raised as they push back on these projects, whether these are going to be as permanent as some would hope. So, yeah, a year from now, I mean, the state will clearly have some type of environmental review done if they keep on the timeline that they've set out for themselves.
Is if doing a lot in that statement?
Yes. Don't get me started on the timelines for various environmental reviews of industries. But I mean, I would expect the PSC to have acted on some type of rules or regulations to address the concerns about ratepayer impacts from these projects. And if not, I'll write about it.
We'll wait a little longer. Well, we've been speaking with Marie French. She is the energy and environment reporter at the Capitol for Politico New York. Marie, thank you so much for making the time and lending us your expertise.
Absolutely, Dave. Happy to be here.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell and Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.